chama Mariana, Tengner Barros, sou bailarina coreógrafa e diretora da Bela Associação, que é uma associação sediada cá em Cacilhas, em Almada. E esta conversa acontece em parceria também com a Casa da Dança, no seguimento do workshop que acabamos de finalizar, que aconteceu durante esta semana cá, workshop de composição intemporal com o Tompkins. E está inserido numa curadoria feita pela Bela Associação, de um projeto chamado A Floresta Invisível, neste caso a Floresta Invisível de Almada, estamos a ser local, keep it local, e esta é a primeira conversa destes ciclos, que chamamos Arte e a Floresta. O projeto Floresta Invisível é uma coisa bastante complexa e extensa, e convido-vos a procurar informação sobre o projeto através das nossas redes sociais, da Bela Associação, no Facebook, Instagram e também no site invisibleforest.ninja. Porque se eu começo agora a falar do que é o projeto, a conversa fica sobre isso e não é o que interessa. Mas esta conversa, eu vou passar o micro ao Marco agora, ele vai falar em inglês, mas o intuito disto é no fundo, partilhar a sua experiência, a sua prática de trabalho em relação direta com a natureza e especialmente com a floresta, a ideia de floresta em todas as suas vertentes. E eu vou-lhe passar agora o micro, provavelmente vou-lhe fazer algumas perguntas se for necessário para guiar um bocadinho a conversa e depois vamos passar a batata a vocês, no fundo, para fazerem perguntas e para abrirmos um diálogo com toda a gente. Portanto, I'm going to ask you to just introduce yourself, like shortly, briefly, because some people might not know who you are, and then I invite you to start talking about your relationship with the forest, the idea of forest.
Good night, I'm Mark Tompkins, choreographer and improviser. Oh, there we go. I live in France, in Paris. I arrived in Paris when I was 19. And I met some very important people who I won't cite because you won't know who they are. But maybe my best friend was Harry Shepard from the States also. And through him I learned a lot of things. He was really my number one mentor in those early years. And one very important thing is he presented me to Steve Paxson and Lisa Nelson in 1978. It was the first time they came to France to teach contact improvisation. And this for me was like a total revelation. No, revelation. What's revelation? Doesn't exist. Revelation. And I became very involved in contact in France and all over Europe, teaching and performing and meeting a lot of people from all over Europe who were involved in contact improvisation. And in the 90s, I got kind of bored with contact improvisation because I found it was very, it was a little too closed in on itself, like duet. You don't see the world, you don't know what's going on, you have no idea what else is happening. And I started to meet other people who were improvisers, but not necessarily contact improvisers. And this really opened up for me the scope of what it means to improvise on stage and in different situations. So I shifted from contact to more open, to what I then called instantaneous composition. And then several years later, I decided to call it real-time composition, which also maybe you know João Fiadero because he calls what he does real-time composition. which I found it was more correct in a way. Composing in real time. Let's see, I'm trying to keep this short. In 1996, I did a workshop in Berlin, and every morning we would go to this artificial waterfall in a park, and I think it was the first time that I really worked like in, well, it wasn't really nature because it was artificial nature, but it was very exciting. And then in the afternoon we would go back to the studio and take that material and see what happens to it inside of the studio. The other big thing that happened was in 1990 with my friend. We bought a house in a small village in the east of France, and we started to restore it, which took about 6 years. And then I realized that it was great to have a house in the country and a garden, but I didn't have any place to work. And there was a man who was almost in the same week, he was leaving his house and he wanted to sell it really fast. So we bought it immediately. And we spent another 5 or 6 years restoring it into a guest house, and most especially into a studio. So everything was more or less finished around 2002, and we started to do workshops in the place that's called Arte, and usually, but not always, I would invite another guest to teach with me. First year was Vera Montero. Then there were people like David Zambrano, Franz Polstra, Maxime Dupuis, a musician. I can't remember them all. Gilles Devois, who is a video maker. Yeah, so, and sometimes I would do the workshop alone. And then, around Arbise is a big forest. And we started to go to the forest to work. And this, every year it got more important. So in almost at the end, around 2015, we hardly spent any time in the studio, and we spent most of the time in the forest. And in 2016, I invited Meg Stewart to come. And it wasn't a workshop, it was more of a laboratory. And it was the beginning of a book that I asked Meg to write with me. This book is called One Shot. And we thought it would take about 2 years, and it ended up taking 6. And it came out today. Yes! But I don't have a copy because it's in Paris. But I do have these pictures are coming from the book. Yeah, so the big thing about being in the forest was that different than being in the studio, you don't have to invent so much because everything is alive and proposing potentials to you. So we worked a lot in the forest, sometimes in the studio, to see if we could find the same type of initiation and triggers that we found in the forest. Yeah, so basically for 15 years, I was working in the forest with different artists and different people.
Could you perhaps, if you can remember, like how this experience, since you began to work in the forest, affected the way you actually then made also your set pieces and even your teaching? How this kind of transformed your ways, your practices, and also if you have some examples of some, to give them a little bit of an idea of what a day, in a forest would be like.
in the forest or in nature, because also I've worked on beaches and lots of different natural sites. All of the perceptions are there. You don't have to invent anything. And then you have to decide what you're going to do with them. This, I think, is the most interesting and important thing of working in nature, is how it's so concrete. It's really there. You know, the sounds, the textures, the colors, the spaces, the trees, the slugs. Slugs, you know, is limaces in French. There's these, they're like snails, but without a cover. Yeah. And yeah, the more I advanced in this research, the more the forest became omnipresent and important to trigger the possibilities of improvisation. I don't think that nature really affected so much my set choreographic work, although almost every year we also would begin a piece in the studio and also in the nature. But it totally affected the way what I teach and the way I teach. Because the sensations are stronger. Well, it's not that they're stronger. In a studio they're strong too, but they're a little bit. The problem is that in a studio, the walls and the floor and the ceiling are the container, whereas in the forest it's much more open and vast, and you can see things very far away. You can be close or inside places, the elements, the leaves, the sticks, all of it. And this, yes, I think I created a lot of new exercises and explorations from working in the forest that I then applied to the studio.
Would you like to give an example of, like when you take the group to the forest, could you just give them a little taste of what one would be like waking up early or doing the kind of extremes that you couldn't get in the...
Well, one extreme is that we would, by the end of the workshop, we would spend a night in the forest. So we wouldn't go to bed, we would stay alive and, well, more or less, some people would go to sleep. They would sleep in the grass or the leaves and then wake up. So this thing of extending time became very important. It wasn't like, oh, the class finishes at 1 and then we have lunch and then we start again. It was more like, how long will this go on and where will it take us? And it's the sunrise and the birds are singing and the sun is coming and this type of thing.
Do you think sorry, can I just add? Because I've been in some of these workshops in RBC, so of course I also remember my experience there. But I wonder how you felt, because you obviously were there way longer, and in terms of also like what it awakens in each person or in you, in terms of like because we of course the senses are more amplified, and and the extremes of like not sleeping or getting up super early to go in the middle of the night or in the dusk or dawn to a forest is not usual practice for most of us. So it actually creates a sort of state that I feel we know it somehow in our DNA, perhaps, like it's something very ancestral, and that it starts to, once you discover it again, then it affects everything else forever somehow. Like that's how I felt. Like it was really, really meaningful for me. But the sort of different practices, like I think it could be interesting for people to know, like so they have a taste. Because the houses where the people would stay were a bit far, right, from the. So if you could just like explain how we would get there, because we had several ways and how to, and then once getting there we had like many exercises that were complex, and maybe I think if people had a little taste about what it is, could help. Just a few examples.
Yeah. So the first thing that we did quite regularly was we would flash. Flashing is like blinking, but instead of seeing, blinking, seeing, it's blind, seeing, blind. So you're only getting a little picture, like a photo, in a way, of where you are in the space. And playing with flashing to go to the site or to come home was very often. We would use that. I think what I started to do was kind of create situations and scores where people had a constraint, like being blind or being flashing or being trying to think of something. Well, we have this other one, which is the blind guide. The blind guide, someone becomes blind, and then they're the guide, and they take their partner with them into the woods, and the partner who has their eyes open protects them so they don't fall off into a hole, or maybe helps them to climb a tree, or maybe, yeah. So doing things that are, that if you did it with your eyes open, it would not be the same. Because when you go from vision to blind, there's a huge difference. When you can see, you rely on your sight even more usually than your hearing or your touch. So for me it's very interesting to turn off a sensation, and especially the eyes, and see how you navigate the new situation. So you had people in different situations. There's a big field there, and some people would run through the field blind, and then there was another person who would get stuck in the, what do you call it? You know, the things that pick yeah, but more like a bush.
Okay.
And it has things like this.
That's spikes, no?
Spikes.
Yeah.
And people would get like lost in this spike, and they didn't know how to get out. And it wasn't so big, but they just kept going around in circles. And then they said, you know, whose fault is this? It's the nature, or it's me that doesn't know how to. Yeah. And probably if they went down on the floor, which some people have a hard time to go on the floor, they would be able to go out from underneath the bush. Mm-hmm. So people were learning about like, all these things about nature, and
Shelters as well.
Yeah, the other one thing we would do is we would build shelters. We would build with, everybody would go out and pick up sticks and poles and wood and ferns and stuff. And we would build a shelter for the number that we were so that we could all fit inside. If it was raining or if it was cold and we wanted to get warm. Or when we spent the night in the forest, some people would sleep in the shelter. And then at the end, we would take the shelter apart and put it back. And this, people were upset because they liked the shelter. And they thought, why do you want us to take it apart now? And I said, we don't leave traces. We built it, and now we destroy it. And this is one of the most important things I learned in the forest. You build something, but you don't leave it, take it apart. So that when you go, it's gone. And yeah, even now today I apply that even in the studio, the idea that you build something, but also you take it away. And one thing that really bothers me is someone who improvises with an object, and it's fantastic, and then they leave it in the middle of the space and walk away. This for me is like impossible to understand. Meaning that you have to take care of your objects. They're inanimate until you make them come alive, and when they die, you have to also remove them.
Can I ask another question? Just it's a curiosity. Because you started, but when you introduced yourself, you mentioned Lisa and Steve,
Yeah.
and I know that they also have a place in the nature, so like in America, right? Was this inspiring for you as well somehow, like their place or the way that they were practicing this?
So I went to visit them in their home in Vermont, and unfortunately it was the winter. It was very cold. There was a lot of snow, and so it I was disappointed because I had this projection of summertime and the plants growing, and we ended up spending time in the studio with Lisa and Simone Forti, working on a piece of theirs, and it turned out to be great. Also, like you have to keep adapting to all the situations. But I did go one day with these things you put on your shoes to go in the snow.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what you call it. It spreads the weight so you don't go deep into the snow. And they told me that I could be careful because there were bears.
Wow.
But I didn't see any bears. And the snow was melting, and it was kind of mushy. So I didn't have a really great time in Vermont.
Which is also, that's
But that's okay, because I was with them, and that was fine.
Would you like to show some parts of the images of the, because then we can open the conversation to questions.
Okay, here's the big field. This is like 5 in the morning, I think. Yeah, this is the name of the place, opposite, and we call it ABC. This is the studio. Very, very wonderful place. About 170 square meters. And yeah, we worked there a lot. And this is my disco ball. This is this is the guest house, and the studio is in the barn behind. This is an interesting photo. It's a photo from early 1900, where you can see this is the guest house. These two. This is our house, and this is the guest house, and the studios over there. And you can see the people from the village, and you can see the kids holding hands and dancing around. This village was really poor, and it was very poor, first of all, and it was a lot of people who had not so much. A lot of drunks. When we found the guest house, there was a room where there was bottles of not wine, but some wine, but mostly eau de vie, you know. Yeah. So I started to give it to people, and then the next day they were all lined up in front of the house, waiting to get their bottle of eau de vie. Yeah, so this was actually quite interesting for us, for Jean-Louis and me, to live in a place so desolate, in a way, and quite difficult to make friends, because they thought we were Parisians and we were faggots, and they always asked where our women were. And we would say, they're coming, they're coming. we don't know when, but they're coming. But over the years, we finally got to be neighbors with some people, not everybody. It's also a very right-wing place. So people were voting for Le Pen a lot, like 33%. So it wasn't like a fantastic holiday village, you know. And we would try, and every year we would, at the end of the workshop, we would do a showing in front of the house. So to kind of get the people interested in what we did. And that worked okay.
So you then were more integrated in that community, or you helped build a new kind of community there?
Yeah, and they did a festival like early 19th century, and Jean-Louis provided all the costumes.
That's good. That's far.
And also put a huge painting in where they had a little stage. So that people really appreciated. But we tried to avoid talking about politics.
Yeah.
The woods. This place is like a clearing, and there's a tree where you saw Mariana, and it's kind of the center of the space we would work. So we would, like a home base, we would come there, we would build the shelter there. This is a solo I made for Meg. We did a thing where everybody picked a name out of a hat, and then they performed at some point or another without the person not knowing. And I picked Meg, so I did a thing for Meg. And it was very emotional because I don't know why, but I think it's because I picked up these slugs and I offered them to her and said they're alive. And she broke down crying. It was very nice. And this I tell you, this text is written by Francisca, about this solo because she was a witness. And this next text is written by Mariana about the full moon night, being in the forest all night long, and all this stuff that happened. And the next day when we came home, some of the people didn't go to bed, and they decided to make a really nice, cozy lounge for everybody, and food for everybody. And around, I don't know what time it was, noon or 1 o'clock, because we'd been out all night. They started to wake people up, and people came, and we asked, I don't know if we asked them to be someone else.
I think we started coming into characters, and then it was contagious,
Yeah.
and it was like...
So it turns out everybody became, there was, well, she was Lorraine Starr, I was Desert Storm, which comes from our hit story. And they were like Africa, Anus, Sunset, Kung Fu, Amanda, Esmeralda, I Forgot One, I Forgot Two, John Cam. And the whole afternoon we just kind of went into real and fake and real and fake and in and out and getting, you didn't know who was being sincere or who was playing a joke or who was... And then in the night it turned into a rave with techno music in the kitchen of the house. And at some point it was really loud, and I thought, this is not going to work for the people who live here. They're not going to enjoy it. So I went to the party and I unplugged the music. And people were quite angry, shocked. They didn't understand, why. And I'm not sure if I did either, but I knew that it was, it's like, is this work or is this just a party? So, this is a text I wrote about that, about how it's very difficult to know the difference between working and playing when you're in this type of situation, doing 36 hours of stuff. And the full moon, you can't see so well. Spider's web. Slug, my dear friends. I like putting slugs all over my body. And then one time I put them on my hand and started really eating my skin. And there was a moment where I thought, I don't know about this. This seems like, And I said, hey, can you cool it, please? And then here is the shelter. And it's funny because everyone is wearing blue. Because we had tons and tons of clothes in our house. And so people, when they went to the forest, if they wanted a shirt, they picked a shirt and they put it on. And it wasn't always blue, but this day was a blue day. Everyone was more or less blue.
Oh, and the ticks, because of the ticks we have to...
Yeah, you have to cover yourself, your ankles and your skin, because there's ticks that fall from the trees, and they give Lyme disease, which can be quite dangerous if you don't find out in time. They dig themselves into your skin, and then if you don't see them. So every time we came back from the forest, we would all together, we would get naked and make sure that everybody's ticks were gone to protect ourselves. But it was also a nice ritual.
Yeah.
Can I show you?
You can, now we should, it's almost time, so we should maybe go into some questions.
Yeah.
But you can, if you want, just wrap it up, if you want to say anything about the book or...
Yeah, so this is a project we did in Vienna, in Constance, in 2018. They invited us to do 4 improvisation performances. And this is, these photos come from those improvisations. And the whole project was called Serious Fun. And it was funny because at the time, a lot of people in the group said, why are you called Serious Fun? It's like, serious fun? And then after the 4 days, they said, I know why you call it serious fun. Maybe you know Volmir Codiero, Marcio, what's her name? Meg here climbing in the back. This was the space. The audience was sitting on 2, like a triangle on 2 sides. And then there was the space, and then there was this door. It was a door you could push on a button, and it was a huge door, really huge. And it would open or close. And outside you had this thing that you could climb on or whatever. And then behind there's cars and parking. This is Francisca. In a fur, I don't know, I can't remember very well. I don't remember what it was, but it was like a fur. And here's Mariana and Maria Scaroni. This is it's like exploration with sound. One person is receiving sound, and the other people are making sound around them with stuff, voice, and whatever. Oh, I won't go into this. Too much. Well, this is also the same thing. Collage we made, and then put it in the fire, like the shelter. Meg and Mariana and Mark, one of the musicians. Yours truly, with Mark, Volmir, and the musicians. I won't tell you about that. Text about what we love and what we hate. So this was also very, very, very nature-oriented. Meg did a workshop in Poland, and she invited some people like me and Gilles. And it was in the middle of, it's like an old farm that's been transformed into a residency place. And very, very nice. Here we are having I think it was very early in the morning. It's kind of hippie paint. Usually I don't like these things. I don't like so much hippie things in improvisation. I like more, composition. This is a nice photo. Here we are doing one of my favorite exercises, which I told you about. One person is blind and one person can see, and then they do a duet, and then they change. And we did it by the lake, so it got really interesting between the sky, the water, the sand. Very nice experience. I won't show these. Megan and me made in Poland. We made a duet called One Shot, like the book. And then every time we did a workshop or whatever, we would do a new version of One Shot. Sometimes with the musicians, sometimes not. Sometimes with props, sometimes not. But the main thing about this duet is that we took words from the lexicon that we made about words that have to do with composition, real-time composition. And we would put some around on the floor, and we would pick one, and that became the theme of that moment. So it would say real thing, and that would guide us into, I don't know what, or it would say the big picture, or it would say dramaturgie, or it would say negotiation, or it would say shelter, memory, this was about shelter. I think this came from shelter. You can see that out here, my feet. Forest. Yeah, this one was a friend of Meg's who gave her some masks. We decided to use them. That's in Tic Tac in Brussels. David Zambrano. So the words are the same, but the situation is different, and we don't do this at all the same thing from one time to another.
Up a little bit if you want to make any comment or ask a question. We have some time.
I have a lot of
Well,
maybe someone else needs clarifications.
Maybe we'll go to dinner.
no, but you can ask, of course. Like,
the most hot.
The most hot?
Question.
Like the brûlant.
The brûlant. It's complex, maybe we go for that. No, are there any manifests in the book is one question.
Are there any manifests?
Like the part
Yes.
that you pass really quickly?
Yes.
You have like kind of manifests?
There's one, I would say, it's a manifest, and then the We Love, We Hate is not a manifest, but it's kind of like a manifest. We say that we hate when people run around in circles, and when they put their t-shirts over their head, and when they leave something in the space, lifeless.
Okay, so I go to the complicated question. Recently I was reading on Notes on Camp, and I remembered in the No Manifest from Yvonne Rainer, there's a phrase that she says, no to camp. And last time we were together, I did a provocation, not directly to you, but I felt you were provoked by this phrase, the show must not go on. And you were saying, no, the show must go on. And I would like to...
Who said the show must not go on?
Me. I wrote it on the paper.
Yeah.
That came out like in a discourse core.
Yes.
In the marathon. And I felt you were intrigued, not intrigued in a more wanting to say the show must go on. And I would like that this tension between no to camp, notes on camp, the show must go on and the show must not go on. Would you relate to that?
Well, I can relate first of all to the No Manifesto. There's a lot of things that I say yes to.
Yeah.
And also Meg says, everything she said no to, I said yes to. And I feel a little bit the same way about the No Manifesto. Do you all know what is the No Manifesto? Or not?
No.
Yvonne Rainer, do you know who is Yvonne Rainer?
Not everybody.
So she was a very important choreographer in the 60s and 70s and until today, because she's still making work. Although there was a long period where she was making films and not choreography. And in 1965, she wrote a text, which I can read to you. And it became, in a way, perhaps, the foundation of postmodern dance. It was the statement that resonated, I think, the most in that period. I'm almost there. Where is she? Here she is. So, here we go. She wrote, no to spectacle, no to virtuosity, no to transformations and magic and make-believe, no to the glamour and transcendence of the star image, no to the heroic, no to the anti-heroic, no to trash imagery, no to involvement of performer or spectator, no to style, no to camp, no to seduction of spectator by the wiles of the performer, no to eccentricity, no to moving or being moved.
I don't see this.
But then you have to realize that what she was looking for was a very non-virtuosic body. Her vision of dance in its effort to explore neutrality rather than expressivity, experimenting with functionality. She crafted an objective body through task-oriented works like Trio A, that she taught to anyone who wanted to learn it.
And the manifest, I think it belongs to Trio A. It was text for Trio A.
I don't know.
So it's not something that she's giving to the world like
Perhaps.
like
So it was in context of
it has a context.
So just to go on with that, in terms of lineage, which is part of the book, which I won't show you, Steve Paxton, Lisa Nelson, Simone Forti, Anna Halpern, Yvonne Rainer, Contact Improvisation, Harry Shepard, my mentor. Judson Dance Theater. So Judson Dance Theater was created in 1962 in the Judson Memorial Church in New York City. And it lasted for 2 years. And since then it's become a monstrosity of historical subject about dance, and especially postmodern dance, because that, people say that is where postmodern dance was born. One of the problems this says, it seems that the most essential aspect of Judson's legacy was not the work they produced, but the vision of how they regarded their work, promoting the concept that anything could be dance. So this was very important. And after that, she made a piece called Continuous Project Altered Daily with some dancers in this 1970. And this piece, it turned into a group of improvisers called Grand Union, in which there was Trisha Brown, Barbara Dilley, Douglas Dunn, David Gordon, Nancy Lewis, Steve Paxton, and Yvonne Ringer. And they chose the name Grand Union because people said that what they were doing was not dance. And you know, Grand Union is it's not only the big train station, but it was also at the time a big supermarket. Anybody else?
I have a curiosity. When you are in the forest, I want to know if you feel the people of trees, the stone people. I want to know if you feel this.
If you feel what?
Everything, because everything is alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if I am correct. If you feel the stone, feel the tree, she talk about you like this, or you only on the forest and you have respect. Yes, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not clear for me if you and the other people feel everything is
Okay,
here.
so I make the attempt to transmit to other people that everything in the forest is alive, including the stones. That everything has molecules that are vibrating at different levels, different speeds, and that if they connect to it, they can feel it.
Thank you.
I can say one thing just because I remember this is in addition to this, it's like, for instance, if you are, and it's connected to what you were saying, if you're in the studio and you use a chair, let's say, and for some reason whatever you were doing was, the energy was, you can control it and you broke the chair, for instance. I mean, it's bad, like you have consequences, of course, like you might not need to pay for the chair or whatever, and you might be feeling like you didn't do a proper, you didn't take care of things like you should have. But in the forest, when you do something like that, it has a totally different consequence. And I had an experience with one of the workshops I did with Mark, that I had a big revelation, I had a big opening moment, and I was so high with this experience, that I was doing things that I was not used to. And I did a huge jump into that thing where the tree is there. And I grabbed the branch, like I was really, wah! And I broke it. And it was like, I hurt the tree, like I literally broke, it was like this big. And it was awful, and this was really, slap in the face, like, I mean, it's a living being, and maybe you should think a bit more, it was really like a wake-up call. And years later, when I returned to the same forest with the lab, that tree, with the picture where I'm naked, is the same tree. And I felt like we reconnected, because during another improvisation, I saw like what you call the liquid that comes inside the
Sap.
yeah, I had this big revelation with that, and I felt like she was kind of saying it's fine, like, and I had this thing, I had to make this ritual with it, and it was very, very strong, and I think it's important also this part of the, because I mean, of course here things are also alive if you want to think in particle levels and vibration and all that, but there I think it gives a lot more instant feedback to the consequences of your and the responsibility that we need to have. Of course, we don't want to be like, oh, I can touch this or I can touch that, but yeah, it was a very powerful experience for me. Like it really changed a lot for me. Just wanted to share that.
I think in the forest, more than like in a place like this, you learn to respect everything.
Yeah.
Like you know, who are you to come in and step on stuff and break it? And some people like to do that. They get in the woods and there's a lot of dead wood, so they really, you know. And this for me is like, you know, are you really aware of what it is you're doing? I mean, are you just breaking things because it's fun? Or is there a reason for it? And building the shelter is completely different because every stick is creating something that will be used by us to protect us. And taking it apart is kind of melancholic sometimes, but at the same time it's yeah, it's the you give it back. You give it back to the forest.
There's a difference between beautiful and sublime. And beautiful is the order. I feel that when you're talking about the forest, you're talking about this level of beauty where everything is ordered and you are part of it. So there's an harmony somehow. But I wonder if you talked before about the bear. So if the same sensation. So one question: if you have been in other type of contexts where you are in danger, so you have this kind of sublime because you are very small, facing that possible danger. So comparing these two types of situations, when the forest is a safe place and you are in a safe environment, whereas in contrast with a place where you are with your senses heightened because you are in danger.
Is that a question?
So if you have been,
that's a
and
statement,
if
which I...
No, it's not a statement. It's if you have been and if you can compare these two situations.
Well, in my woods, there's no bears. There's only wild pigs.
There's
And-
vipers.
What?
There's vipers.
Vipers? No.
Yeah, the Boca brought one.
No,
It's not a
this is a
viper?
little teeny
Yeah.
viper.
But it's a viper.
No, it's not like that. In this place, there's not so much danger anymore. Maybe before, probably before, but now, no.
Mind you, there is like, I remember also when we had these scores in the night, that you would say, okay, now each person goes alone to the wherever, like we had to go in the darkness and stay for like an hour and then return. A lot of people had experiences, including myself, of like some sorts of danger that could be like the steep, like holes and cliffs. And I remember also once I started to get more heightened, like with this kind of, I think, ancestral awareness, and I was really writing it and loving it. That's when I kind of got to a place that I was like, an inch from falling, you know. So there's an adrenaline, somehow a mix of extreme joy, extreme excitement, and then a possible deadly situation, much more than I guess in the studio, because we don't have enough.
But even if it's not dangerous, you can be scared.
Ah, for sure.
Maybe you are not, but I could feel like cold and scared. Yeah.
But that score is about how do you feel in the night, alone, in the forest, and of course you start imagining all sorts of things that aren't there. And you're very pleased to come back to the fire. Oh God, human beings!
Even if there's no bears, you feel small. That's my experience. I was not there in the night, and I'm not sure if I would be able to.
But I think when you came, we weren't yet into the more excessive stuff. This came every year a bit more like, what can I propose that will scare the shit out of me?
I have one more question. It's about the audience, because all these experiences you were describing in the forest, you don't have a formal audience, but your audience to others and to yourself. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? About being a spectator or a witness?
No, I would just say that if there's no spectator, there's no show.
So
So a lot of the stuff we do in the forest is for us, but then you apply it in another situation.
And then you have the birds or everything is like.
Yeah, the birds, they go, oh, that's shit. They shit on you. Like, come on, get it together.
But actually, I remember also in RBC, in a place, not in the forest, but in the other area where the washing is. We went behind, I don't know why, we went to a part that was like private or something. There was these wild horses, or they looked wild. And this was a very interesting experience for me because we were improvising again, another context, more rural than forest in this case. And I was doing a lot of, I don't know, I went like, doing a lot of arm stuff, like really moving the air. I was like, and then these 4 horses coming in my direction, like, I don't think they were wild, but they were not. I mean, they were in their wild state, like, and I wasn't sure, like, I had never been in a situation like that. And I was really, again, it's something about humility as well, or like, I was like, I realized the power of movement there, like, because these things that for us can be, you know, a person looking as audience can see, oh, it's nice or it's not nice, or whatever, it judges the form. For the animals, it's information, and it's not clear what I wasn't sure what I was doing even, and this made me very aware of like what intentions you have when you are making movement, because there, again, like you said before, like you get an immediate response from the environment, and it was really like I was like, okay, they're coming in my direction. They came very close, and they were like, like the 4 of them. And I didn't know if they were liking it or not liking it, or if they wanted to say hi, or if they were saying go away. And I just kind of like went really slowly back, and I had like several experiences in RBC that took the rug out of my feet in terms of not only the like real-time composition, but also our relationship to the environment and the consequences again of your actions, like and the intentions and all that. So this kind of audience was like very interesting for me. Nobody else was seeing but the horses. That's understandable.
We can finish
Huh?
here.
What?
We can finish.
Yeah, sure. You have no more questions, right? We should finish. It's already. We need to eat. We're working a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming, listening.
Yes. This. I mean, we will at some point also edit this and put it somewhere like on our YouTube, or so that you can have you can access it.
We want the book.
The book will come. I mean, at some point will come here, I guess. No? Like we'll bring it.
Like for
I think
bookshop?
we should talk about that. I think I should send you,
Yeah.
because I don't know any.
Yeah. I'll be a dealer. Yeah. It might take a few weeks, I guess, for that to happen. We'll see. But it's already out, so it's sooner than expected.